Welcome back to CT, everybody. Thank you so much, Carlisle. We are in the Ten Commandments. Did a little swerve about 2 hours ago because I realized we don't have time to get through all the commandments, the rest of them tonight. We wanted to, but we're going to do the next three instead because there's such rich theological content in here. And as Greg pointed out last week, they're they're also called the 10 words, just the words of God, from God to humans. Now, remember historically the context here. We're looking at the nation of Israel. They're gathered in the Sinai, uh, right before the mountain where God has appeared, and God now is teaching them about who He is. He's brought Moses up. The cloud has descended. It's this great, glorious, scary, terrifying thing. But God is introducing Himself to the people and giving him His law. And starts with the Ten Commandments. And Greg talked about last week the first four, five. How many did you get through last week? Four. Yeah, you got through four. That's a lot. Good job, Greg. The first four have to do with God's relationship with man. So it's between us and God. We know God desires us. God loves us. He wants to communicate with us. He wants to have a relationship with us. And so there's a way of going about that relationship that's healthy, and there's a way that's toxic, unhealthy. The rest of the Ten Commandments are going to have to do with our relationship with one another, between humans and other humans, how we treat one another. And remember, the Ten Commandments, they're like a blueprint for life, right? This is not just like God's opinion on good advice, how you should live your life, things you should avoid. He is the master and designer of the universe, and He made us a certain way. He designed us a certain way. There's a way to go about life that works, and there's a way that's highly destructive. And so this is God's loving kindness that He is communicating truth to us, to humanity. And He's giving us the blueprint for life. For example, I've heard that someone gave a good illustration of this, that it's like putting diesel gas in a car that is not a diesel car. That's a very destructive thing to do. But actually, this kind of took me down a research route, and I got sidetracked by going into research on the difference between diesel engines and regular engines, and I got caught up in this for too long. So now we're not going to cover the rest of the commandments. But look, no, that's not why. But it was a fascinating read. I realized the better illustration is putting regular gas in a diesel engine. All right, this is what it's like to live apart from God's design for us. It's destructive. Why is that a better illustration? Well, because if you put diesel gas in a regular car, you'll know immediately something's wrong. The car actually, as soon as the fuel hits the injector, it's done. It'll just stall out. It won't work because the fuel's too thick. However, if you put regular gas in a diesel engine, it will work for a little bit, but there will be signs along the way. It'll start to go. What happens is the vehicle starts to jitter. The reason for this, I found out, and I was so fascinated, I'm sure you guys are fascinated by this too, is, regular gas, it combusts at a quicker rate than diesel fuel. And so what's happening is there's little explosions happening in your car. In a diesel engine, it's going to happen way more than it should if there's regular gas in there. So there's going to be explosions all over the place, little explosions. Stuttering starts to happen. Black smoke starts coming out of your exhaust. That's another sign that something's bad. Eventually, these explosions start happening more, and it just destroys the parts inside the engine. And eventually, the engine explodes, if it gets bad enough. But pretty shocking. This is what it's like as we try to live our life apart from God's design. It's like we can go for a certain amount of time, but soon we start to realize something is dreadfully wrong. What's this black smoke coming out? This is not working how it's supposed to, right? This is God's pattern. And so the commandments are not arbitrary. They're for a purpose. It's according to God's design. He's not a fun killer. He's all about joy. He invented joy, invented happiness. And so he's just telling the truth that this is the design. This is how you're made. And if you live according to the pattern, how the blueprint, how you're made, you're gonna live the life I have in mind for you. That's the life of joy and peace. And so Jesus had a lot to say about the law as well, the 10 Commandments and that. And he actually sums up the 10 Commandments in Matthew 22:37, which perhaps Greg read last week. And he said to him, "You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind. This is the great and first commandment. And second is like it. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. On these two commandments depend all the law and the prophets." So in other words, that sums up all the 10 commandments. The entire law is summed up right there. Love God and love people. That's at the heart of it. And so in truth, it's all about love. That sums up the commandments. And the commandments are just really kind of expounding on that and giving details on what love looks like as we're practicing it in our lives. And so tonight we're going to begin our discussion of our relationships with one another and the laws and the commands around that. There's a healthy way to go about relationships and a toxic, destructive way. And so the first one I'm going over is found in verse 12 of Exodus 20. So Exodus 20, verse 12. He says, "Honor your father and your mother, that your days may be long in the land that the Lord your God is giving you." Honor your father and your mother. And so the word honor basically means like weight, a weightiness, that you would assign weight or value to something or someone. And so when he's saying honor your father and mother, it's you're assigning value, you're assigning weight to them. There's a respect there. There's an honor there. The opposite of that would be to make light of. So it'd be like, to not honor would be to be like, you don't matter. You're useless. You're not worthy of my time or my attention. And so I'm going to disregard you. That's the exact opposite here. And so his command here is to everyone. Honor your father and mother. Not just kids. Not just kids. This is to all people. Now, he's not saying here, obey your mother and father. Okay? That's a separate command, actually. In Ephesians chapter 6, verse 1, you find one there where he says, "Children, obey your father and mother." And that's talking to children. Actually, to you babies that are back there, I hope you're listening. They're being rebellious. They must obey. And that's good. You should obey. If you're a child, you should obey your parents insofar as they're not calling on you to sin, because ultimately we're called to obey God as our ultimate source of authority. Children obey, but when you're not a kid anymore, it's different. You're an adult, and so the relationship changes at that point. The expectation is not, I'm going to do everything you tell me to do. I'm an adult. I can make my own choices, but we are called to honor our parents. Everyone, regardless who you are, honor your parents. You assign weight to them. It's a relationship that you value. It's not something that you're just going to disregard. The key factor here in being successful at honoring your parents is this: gratitude. Are you grateful for your parents, or are you not? Are you bitter? Are you resentful at your parents? Gratitude makes all the difference in the world. Lots of people struggle with this, right? Because there's complaints levied here. My parents were bad. My parents were not good parents. They were mean to me. They were cruel to me. They abused me, right? I mean, there's real issues that people can and do have with parents. And all these things might be true, yes. And yet we read this command and it's without qualification. Honor your parents. The truth of the matter is this: there is always something to be grateful for regarding your parents. There is something worthy of gratitude. And I can prove it. You're here. You're here. That's at least one thing. Without parents, you wouldn't be here. And even beyond that, if you're here, that means your parents loved you. They had to have loved you, at least somewhat. They've actually done studies on this with infants, and there's actually some horrendous example. You have the Moscow orphanage, which was something that happened, I believe this is the 50s, but this is where they took in, all kinds of orphans, little babies into the orphanages, And what they found was most of these babies died. Not even due to any medical complications, they just died. Why? Well, because there wasn't enough nurses, there wasn't enough people there actually giving love to the babies. What they discovered through that is that infants literally need love to be held, to be talked to be cared for beyond just the food, the sustenance. They need love or else they will just die. You need love to survive. If you're here, it's because when you were a child, your parents or parent loved you. And so there's always something we can find to be grateful for. And he tells them, honor your father and mother, that your days may be long in the land that the Lord is giving to you. So he gives them like a why, so your days may be long. The context here, he's talking about nation Israel. They're coming into the promised land. And so as a nation, it's going to be very important for their survival that they have an attitude of gratitude towards their parents and that they honor them. This is because the family unit is to be God's vehicle for the Israelites, that he was to teach his commandments, show them who he is, and the expectation is then the parents turn around and share this with the children. The children receive that and continue on this spiritual legacy from God. And so for the sake of the nation, that it would survive, there needs to be this honor paid to the parents. Like, I do take you seriously and your values seriously and what you're teaching seriously. And so, yes, that's the expectation. As parents honor God, then children are to honor parents and God. All right, God is our ultimate parent that we're to honor. Thus, dishonoring our parents is a route to destruction. If you struggle with honoring your parents, you're in for a life of hurt. That's because the home is the foundation for love. In the home is where we learn how to love. We learn what love looks like as children, first and foremost through our parents. That's our first example there. And that relationship continues to be like a foundational part of who you are, even as you age, as you get older. And so if there's issues there, there's going to be deep fundamental issues with you. Broken down family relationships, family ties leads to an inability to love outside the home. And I've seen this personally, through many people I've discipled and mentored. It's just amazing how many, these people, they'll come to the table with issues and significant struggles, significant mental health problems. It's shocking how many of these, as you pry, as you ask questions, it kind of boils down to, I got problems with my parents. It's like a very large percentage. That's what it boils down to. You get down to it, it's like, wow, there's significant bitterness and resentment, right? You're acting out in these ways. You're struggling with this issue and that issue. And you're having these anxious thoughts and all that, but what's at the heart of it is you're bitter and resentful at your parents. It's incredibly common. And so that's why, as someone who mentors younger people, I always make this an issue as part of the discipleship is, how's your relationship with your parents? And where there's issues there, I make it a priority that go back, love, and honor your parents. And it's amazing also to see the deliverance that comes from that. It's like a weight that's lifted off people when they find victory here, and the relationships start to be fixed, and there's healing there. It's like, oh my gosh, I feel like a new person. I've been carrying around this resentment, this bitterness for my whole life, and I feel like a brand new person now. It's amazing. It's healing. It's a bug on me. It's a route to healing, right? And that's because it gets down to the fundamental level with us. Our relationships with our parents, it's so fundamental and important. Our culture is so broken here. So much of the ailments that you see in the culture and the breakdown of relationships in general comes back to this issue, the relationship between children with their parents. There's so much bitterness, so much resentment, so much of a victimhood mentality of just like, I don't need to go back and rekindle things with my parents. It's all their fault. All my problems in my life are their fault. And so I need to cut them out. I need to be done. And they are worthless. They are worthless to me. They carry no weight to me. Thus, you have a bunch of broken, hurt, resentful people going out in the world, leading lives of destructions with significant mental health struggles. That's the result. It's what you get when your heart is so seized by bitterness. And it's like this attitude of just, screw them. I'm not going to worry about them. It's you're not just hurting them. Here, who you're hurting the most is yourself. Thus, you have so many people with like zero confidence in the world, right? They have an inability to make just normal relationships, friendships, romantic relationships work. So much of that gets down to just the fact that there are parent issues. They carry it around like a shackle around their foot for their entire lives. Hugely destructive. And so then how can we begin to see victory in this area, our relationship with our parents? Remember this, first and foremost, that by honoring your parents, you are honoring God. You are being faithful to God's call when you go back to honor your parents. You're honoring God by doing that. It's a ministry. It's a wonderful thing to do. Second, it's find something to be grateful for. Find that which is good. Find that which you can hold on to. Gratitude is like the key to release when you're stuck in resentment and bitterness. There's always something that you can find that you can be grateful for, and it completely changes your attitude. And then two, realize as you get older, there's this transition that happens, right? When you're a kid, like the parents are the ones doing all the pouring in. They do the sacrificing, they do the investing, they do the giving, and you're just a recipient. But then you grow up. And we're not supposed to just be stuck in that recipient taking role. But instead, there's this challenge. It's like, honor your parents. Prioritize that relationship. Now it's time for you to learn how to give. And it's so healthy and so good to be able to go back to your parents and start to give. It's healthy for you. God wants to take us from being takers and make us givers. And this is a difficult transition. Again, I've worked with many young men through this because it's like, again, they've lived their entire lives just used to taking and receiving. And so then now to turn around and start to give back to the parents, it's very awkward. It's very strange. It's very like, I don't like this. I'm used to, just getting from them. But it's a very important step for our maturity. Learn to give to our parents. Help. Provide a little bit. Honor them. That means taking the initiative with it, right? So it's awkward and it's strange, but with God's help, we're able to do that. Initiate with them. Initiate the relationship. This will enable us to break free of generational resentments and issues and bitternesses. Like that's the thing. Like we read before, that this sin is passed down from father to son through generations. Many generations, this sin comes down. But you, as a follower of Christ, have an opportunity to break that chain. And so much of this generational issues boils down to that there was a breakdown in the relationship between parents and the kid. You can break that cycle. Break the cycle. Start a new relationship with your parents, a healthy one, a fruitful one. And you'll just see like these issues that have been weighing you down for so long. It's like a release, and you're set free, and it feels like you can breathe again. That's how God works. He heals relationships. Now on to the next one. In Exodus 20:13. You shall not murder. I mean, I don't know what I'll say about that. Don't murder. I guess if you are a murderer, stop. I would say that. You got to stop. And, I guess you don't have to tell me, but like tell the cops, like, please, I don't know. But you got to stop. But I suppose there's more to be said here, because when you look into it, the Hebrew word murder is rashah. And rashah is basically is more specific. It has to do with like a violent, unjust killing. Really, it's getting to like in the ancient day, blood feuds were very common. So there's a lot of retribution, slaying, bloodshed. And so it's getting specifically to that because, obviously there are some that would take a verse like this, you shall not murder, as a justification for pacifism, why we should not have war. Like there's no such thing as a just war because it's all murder. um, and anti-capital punishment kind of thing. But this is getting to the unjust killing. That's this one. I don't really care your stance on capital punishment. I mean, there's a good case to be made why it's kind of messed up today. It's weird that they make people wait like 20, 30 years before they execute that. Don't know what that's about. Have whatever opinions you have. But this is about unjust violence, murder outside the law, done in rage, done in malice. Why is murder a problem? Simply this. Humans are created in God's image. Genesis chapter 1 tells us that. Male and female, he created them. In the image of God, he created them. That gives every single human being inherent dignity and respect. There's a value there. You are valued by God. You are created in his image. And we can just tell this is the case experientially in life, right? There's something very different when I just killed this bug on my chest than if I killed one of you now, right? Like there's a qualitative difference in killing an animal versus a human. Last year, almost a year ago, I killed my first buck going hunting. And I'm going to be totally honest with you guys. I might offend some of you, but I didn't really feel bad about that. It was actually kind of cool. I guess there's a lot of deer lovers here. Okay, sorry. But, that was fun. I would feel much differently if I killed a human. This would really scar me in a way I can't even imagine. I would guess. But we can kind of tell, when you murder a human, it's not right. There's something horrendous about that. There's a dignity and value that humans have that animals don't. It's one of the things that a naturalist or an atheist, somebody who doesn't believe in God, has a hard time reckoning with. Because, if we're just animals, what makes us any better than, say, killing a bug or something? I mean, there really shouldn't be any difference if we're just more evolved animals. But there's something in our own experience that cries out that says, actually, no, there's something qualitatively different about humans. There's worth there. And and when someone kills someone unjustly, that is a horrendous crime, worthy of, the highest form of punishment that we have. We ought not do that. Where does that come from? It comes from our design. We're made in the image of God. Thus, we are all, as humans, valuable, and you carry dignity. That means there's no room, as far as God is concerned, for racism. Every human is created in the image of God. There's no room for sexism. Every man and woman created in the image of God. That has no place in the church. We recognize every single person has inherent dignity and respect. It made me think about, how in our political sphere these days, how dehumanizing the language has become. How political, they'll dehumanize their political opponents. We just had an assassination attempt literally during CT. Not here. It was our former president, Trump. He was almost shot and killed. And it's kind of no wonder in a way. I mean, there is such vitriol and hate all over the place from both sides, not just the left, but the right too. It's just both sides are guilty of this dehumanizing language. You are a scumbag. You are less than you're a subhuman piece of trash garbage. I literally was just talking to someone yesterday about this, and they were on a tangent about Donald Trump is subhuman piece of garbage excrement. And I was just like, oh my gosh. He's got character issues. I 100% agree with you. And I don't personally like him, I suppose, but you go too far. I mean, he actually is a human being, just like Joe Biden's a human being, just like you're a human being, just like I'm a human being. And so we ought not use this kind of dehumanizing language on each other, certainly, and certainly even on those who disagree with us. We have to have a respect that you are a human being created in the image of God, and God loves you. That's foundational, right? It makes me think, too, in the political sphere, there's such vitriol around the people around us that are not like us, right? And there's all these foreigners and all, and stuff. It's like, but look, you're making a value judgment in your own mind that there's my people and there's their people. Our people are greater than those people. We're all created in the image of God. every single person is worthy of dignity, respect, and love. And so as Christians, as we are relating with one another, we have to keep that in mind. It's also why I'll mention I believe that abortion is evil because it's the taking of a human life, an intentional taking of innocent human life. That's not a different animal that's in the womb. It's a human being. And so this is the command there: you shall not murder. And so personally, that's where I stand on that issue. So lastly, I'll say this about this point: that if you're created in the image of God, you are precious. We also have a tendency to dehumanize ourselves as we think we're worthless, not worthy of love and respect. We're just the worst subhuman piece of garbage, especially as we screw up or something. We just feel like trash, like worthless. But you're never worthless to God. You are created in his image. Your life is precious. You are precious. You're a precious soul to God, and he loves you dearly. No matter who you are, no matter what you've done, that does not change about you. You are created in his image, and you have respect and love from him. You have value. So then, Exodus 20, verse 14, he says, you shall not commit adultery. And adultery, I guess we know what that is. That's cheating on your spouse. But this is a more broad principle. Historically, sexual immorality, which is simply, sex taken outside of the marriage context, which is a sin. Sexual immorality in this day and age was basically almost exclusively an issue of adultery. And the reason why is they would get married, by the time they were starting to become, sexually aware. They're getting married very young, 14, 15, to each other. And so if you were, committing sexual sin, it was going to be adultery more likely than not. But nonetheless, the Bible makes a case about, adultery, cheating on your spouse, that's horrendous. But also taking sex outside of marriage is wrong too. Hebrews 13:4 says, let marriage be held in honor among all, and let the marriage bed be undefiled. For God will judge the sexually immoral and adulterous. So he's grouping it both together, sexually immoral and adulterous. And so again, let me just say, sexual immorality, he's talking about any sexual activity outside of a marriage between a man and a woman. That is sexual immorality according to the Bible. 1 Corinthians 6:18 says this, says, flee from sexual immorality. Every other sin a person commits is outside the body, but the sexually immoral person sins against his own body. So there's also something very unique about sexual sin. All sins are equal in terms of, they condemn us. We're all equally condemned. Our standing before God, we can't earn our way, right? However, not every sin is equal in its consequence. And there's something about sexual immorality that gets to our very core of who we are. The damage there is deep and horrific. God's design for sex, again, it's in marriage between a man and woman, and it's a great design. God's not anti-sex. He made sex. He invented sex. It's awesome, and it's sweet. It's beautiful. We're called to enjoy it and have lots of it in the context of your marriage with your spouse. Anything outside of that falls under this sexual immorality category. And so it's important to say because, God created sex, and there's something beautiful about it. So even in the context of a marriage, you should be doing that, and that should be a part of your intimacy. If it's not there in the context of a marriage, that's actually a problem, and something to work through. But God designed it. It's beautiful and it's sweet. When it's taken outside of that context, it's horrific and it's destructive. We're seeing this today in our culture in the West. We've become like a case study of what happens when you take sex outside of God's design. And so what's been the evidence of the past, 50, 60 years, whatever, it's horrific, right? Today, sex is treated as a commodity, just something, it's like satisfying an urge. It doesn't matter who you have sex with, as long as they are a, willing participant, who cares? It's fine. And so what's the big deal? And so the sexual revolution sometime, in the 60s, has led behind, a trail of destruction that is impossible to measure. What you're seeing today are failing marriages. People don't know how to commit in the long term because they're used to just satisfying their urges and getting sex wherever you can with whoever you can. And so instead, the divorce rate, it's 50 or more percent at this point, but also less people are getting married because they're just like, I don't have faith that this can work. And, nor would I want to limit myself to just one person. I want to keep the options open that, maybe someday if this relationship isn't working out, I want to be able to leave and have sex with different people. And so people aren't committing for the long term, which is what marriage is, right? I'd like to pursue sex outside of that. But the stats on this are horrific. It's showing that people are unable to make committed long-term relationships work even when they want to because of the sexual damage there. The stats show that cohabitation, which is when you're living together before marriage, it leads to an even higher likelihood that that relationship will end and end horrifically. The Journal of Development of Behavioral Pediatrics found this finding in their study of particularly young people that were sexually active. So tests revealed that adolescents who were sexually active had significantly higher depression scores than non-sexually active subjects. And there was actually a direct correlation they found between number of sexual partners and mental health scores. They were directly correlated in a downward trajectory, right? Mental health goes way down the more sex with the more people that you have. Cheating and unfaithfulness is out of control. Peggy Vaughn, in her book, The Monogamy Myth, says that conservative estimates are that 60% of men and 40% of women will have an affair. Like, that is just scary. That's horrific. People are not making romance work. They're not making relationships work either. When sex is reduced to the level of just an exchange, right, a commodity, it's bad. It's horrific for both men and women. I think in particular, it's bad for women. Marriage is a beautiful provision, right? Marriage is where there's security there. There's supposed to be a commitment there. Sex is done in that context to say, I'm with you forever. I cherish you. I value you so much that I'm committing never to leave you. And it's sweet. There's a reaffirming of that commitment and intimacy within marriage. But instead, we have so many stories today of women who get used, abused, and then cast aside like trash once the guy's done with them. That's how sex is treated today. And there's all these horrific stories that come out, on social media all the time. This person goes down, that person goes down. This woman suffers, horrific sexual abuse, and it's just on the rise, more and more and more and more. And what's at the heart of that is the culture taking sex outside of God's design. It's simply that. Once it becomes a commodity, it's like, why not? Why not sleep with as many people as possible? And I think women suffer the most. But men suffer too. It hurts your ability to connect. It hurts your ability to be intimate with anyone else or have relationships with anyone else. And so I'll say this to the single women here, that if you meet a guy or are with a guy that's pressuring you for sex before you're married, that's not someone that you can trust. If he's doing this, he's not trying to serve you. He wants to use you for pleasure. And so if he was interested in you and actually cherishing and loving you, he'd be willing to wait for marriage. And guys, same thing. If you're with a girl who's pressuring you before you're married to engage in sex, that's also not someone who's trying to help you and trying to be kind, right? That's a path to destruction for both you, for the relationship, and for her. And so I understand the urge. Guys. God put that urge for intimacy within us. Find yourself a spiritual woman who's willing to wait without the pressuring, right? Wait for marriage. Find someone who is committed to that as well, who's not interested in just using your body. Because if someone's pressuring into that, that's what they're interested in doing. They're interested in using you because they're not willing to wait. And they're doing that because they want to reserve the right to leave you still. If they didn't, they would commit to you and they would marry you. But they're not committing to you now. Why are they not committing to you now? Because they're not sure if they're going to be with you still. They want to reserve that right to leave. So remember that. That's why marriage is such a beautiful provision for both men and women. It's a sweet provision. It provides security and stability. It says, even when I screw up, even if I'm not pleasing him or her, A great right now. I'm not worried about what's going to happen with us because we've committed to each other. Even during this rough patch right now, we're going to see this through together. That's security. That's peace. That's love. That's real love right there. It's a commitment. It's sweet. It's a provision. And so I just hate to see how the culture denigrates marriage today, and they just see it as like, oh, you're shackling yourself, and it's so boring, and just get out and have, like, what are you doing that for? Actually, it's sweet and it's amazing. And why would you want to just throw yourself out there on as many people as possible and destroy your life? There's something sweet and beautiful about marriage. It's God's design. It's also the reason we have such a problem society in terms of broken homes. What you find is, in these households where they're, together for a little while, and then, she gets pregnant, he leaves, these kids that grow up in single parent homes, that becomes a significant obstacle for them in life. Crimes in communities is also directly correlated with the number of single parent homes. And kids, it's particularly damaging on kids how sex has been commodified, because they have to pay a price too, and they pay a price in that they grow up in a home where the commitment isn't present, and that's very destructive. And so it literally destroys communities. I'll add too, fueling the sick view of sex today, I think in large part, is the rise in pornography. Because pornography, it's discipleship. It's teaching us something. And what it's teaching us is, sex is a commodity, and it's okay just to use someone for your sexual gratification and pleasure. It's a lie. But so many people are caught up in the lie because they're caught up in habitual porn use. Studies have shown that porn use is associated with marital distress, higher levels of divorce, less intimacy, higher levels of likelihood of cheating, an increased appetite for like more horrific forms of porn. There is also associated with it a devaluing of marriage and monogamy. We also know porn is highly, highly addictive. Studies show that it's more addictive than heroin. It's easier to kick a heroin habit than it is a porn habit. There's something about it where it just gets in your mind and stays there, and it's so difficult to get out. And so it destroys people's lives. And that's why I'll say, like this is a significant struggle, and porn is just so freely and easily available like it never has today. There's no wonder that there's a porn epidemic. And I remember reading that they're trying to do a study on, for men in particular, porn users versus non-porn users, doing some comparisons, and they weren't able to find enough non-porn or, men that have not looked at porn, like, to do the worst porn habits. It always starts young. It starts very young, and younger than you would think. And so as parents, we have to be especially wise on this issue, not naive. If it's able to be accessed easily at the home, your child will access it. It's just going to happen. So we have to treat that seriously. And also, if you struggle with a porn habit, don't let it get out of control and destroy you, okay? Many people simply don't take it seriously enough because they say, well, I know it's an issue and I'll get it taken care of someday. Someday when I'm a little bit more mature, or when I get married, it probably won't be as problem. The time is now. If it's true that it's more addictive even than heroin, like, think about, how do we deal with a heroin addiction, right? It's like that's an all hands on deck situation, right? That's where we're going to find you someone that you can be accountable to. We're going to have you, go into a group where you can talk about this in a way that's healthy and that's good. Talking with other people that share the struggle. That's like what you have to do with someone who's using heroin regularly. Like you're not going to risk them using it and suffering an overdose and dying. And so it's an all hands on deck situation. We need to start looking at porn that way. It's so highly destructive. Like we shouldn't just be content sitting back and doing nothing about it. Find help, get help, because help is there. We actually have our burden ministry that meets here at the study center on every other Thursday, I believe. That, if you're interested in checking that out, I would talk to Rich Hunter back there. He helps to lead that, along with Ted Howley's here. But that's a great start. Go there and they talk about addiction and what it does and ways, keys to release. But get a plan together for healing. Find a partner, find an accountability partner, a friend that you trust that's going to help keep you accountable too. That's really key. Find someone who's willing to help keep you accountable. The point of all this is that where he's saying, do not commit adultery, flee sexual immorality, it's not arbitrary. It's how we're designed. We're designed for marriage. This is where sex is meant to be. Outside of that, insanely destructive. But as you embrace God's design for sex, it's beautiful. It's sweet. There's nothing sweeter than a committed married couple that are committed to one another, that's experiencing intimacy how God designed it. It's sweet. And it's wonderful. It builds closeness. And I'll tell you what, that's the greatest gift that you can give to your children is a healthy, thriving married life with your spouse. That's the greatest gift that you can give to your child because they look at you, they look at your example, and they see and they experience love. They realize how love can and should work from you. It's a sweet gift. An intact family is, and a close family relationship is. And so, thus, we shouldn't be surprised when we take it outside of God's design. Destruction follows suit. Our society, our culture is a case study in just that. Now, that's the last commandment I want to go through tonight. And I'll tell you what, right about now, you might be feeling pretty guilty because you're like, I've broken a command before, and I've sinned, I've been a bad person, and I've lied, I've murdered. Well, no, maybe not that, but I just don't measure up to God. And I want to say this to you. You're right. You don't measure up to God. As a matter of fact, Jesus in the Sermon on the Mount has this to say about the law and the commandments. In Matthew chapter 5:17, it says, "Do not think that I have come to abolish the law or the prophets." Ooh, that's even worse news. He doesn't abolish the law. We're still under it. "I have not come to abolish them, but to fulfill them. For truly I say to you, until heaven and earth pass away, not an iota, not a dot will pass from the law until all is accomplished. Therefore, whoever relaxes one of the least of these commandments and teaches others to do the same will be called least in the kingdom of heaven. But whoever does them and teaches them will be called great in the kingdom of heaven. For I tell you, unless your righteousness exceeds that of the scribes and Pharisees, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven." Oh, that's even worse news, really, if you think about it. You need even more righteousness than you thought. You think you fail even worse than you think you're failing before God. That's a high bar he's setting. Your righteousness have to exceed even the religious leaders of the day. And he actually has more to say about these specific commandments we read tonight. In Matthew 5:21, he says, you have heard that it was said to those of old, you shall not murder. Hey, you guys heard that because I told you. You shall not murder. And whoever murders will be liable to judgment. But I say to you that everyone who is angry with his brother will be liable to judgment. Whoever insults his brother will be liable to the council. And whoever says, "You fool," will be liable to the hell of fire. You ever called anyone a fool before? Or an idiot? You're liable to hell, to go to hell. You're guilty, and judgment's coming. That's impossible, you say. Well, maybe. I don't remember calling people names, at least not for a long time. But what about this? Matthew 5:27. You have heard that it was said, you shall not commit adultery. You guys heard that one too, didn't you? Yeah, we did. We talked about that. But I say to you that everyone who looks at a woman with lustful intent has already committed adultery with her in his heart. Oh! You may not have cheated on a spouse, but have you ever looked at a woman with lust in your heart? Looked at a man with lust in your heart? Ever in your life? One time? You're an adulterer, according to Jesus. Oh, man. It gets even worse, you guys. If you're feeling bad now, just wait till you hear this one. Matthew 5:48. You therefore must be perfect as your heavenly Father is perfect. Ho! Let's get cracking, guys. Any questions? No. That would be really bad news, right? None of us are perfect. Some of you may be feeling very guilty right this moment, right? You are guilty. This is an impossible standard. We can't be perfect. So, you know what? If we're justified before God based on our ability to follow these laws and be on the straight and narrow, we're in so much trouble. It ain't even funny. And yet, in Romans 3:20, it says this, "For by works of the law, no human being will be justified in his sight." He admits no one's going to be justified by following the law. Since through the law, he says, comes knowledge of sin. And so the point of the law isn't something that we have to try to work hard and achieve so we can earn God's favor. That's not the point. You're missing the entire point if that's what you think. It's to show us that we don't measure up. It tells us what right and wrong is, so we know what sin is, yeah? And it also shows us we can't measure up. We fail in so many ways every single day. We need help. We need grace. And so Romans 3:28, he says, "For we hold that no one is justified by faith. For we hold that one is justified by faith apart from the works of the law." So what saves you? It's not following the law, it's faith. Your faith saves you when you put your faith, your trust in Christ. He lived the perfect life we couldn't, and he died on the cross to pay for our sins so that we could be justified by God, because we can't possibly live up to this perfect standard. And so salvation comes not by really trying hard on these commandments. It comes by receiving Christ in faith, and that alone. And that's it. It's God imparting righteousness onto you through your faith in Christ. Now, that being said, right? This is these qualities, right? The law isn't bad. This is God's moral standard. And his commands are good. But the commands are not something we work harder to try to achieve, to do better at. It's actually something God brings about himself in our life. Philippians 1:6 says, "And I am sure of this, that he who began a good work in you will bring it to completion at the day of Jesus Christ." God is the one within us, shaping us, cleaning us, sanctifying us. Sanctification simply means like the process of becoming more holy. I mean, another way you could just say becoming more spiritually mature, more God-like, more Christ-like. And what he's saying here is, if you're a Christian, God is already doing this work within you. So we don't have to sit back in a ton of guilt, like I fail in so many ways. I just really got to try harder and try harder. God is already trying harder within you. He is working within your heart to shape it, to mold it, to clean you of these things, so that he can present you as perfect, as holy before God. You know, a lot of people, they teach the Sermon on the Mount, excerpts of which we've already read, as this like impossible ideal, that it's just like, it's a utopian ideal that we can't possibly, ever get to or do or whatever. And in a way, it's true in terms of our justification before God. We're not going to measure up to be justified before God. But these are qualities that God is bringing about in your life right now as we speak. If you are a Christian, he's bringing up these qualities. These qualities are not impossible for God. They're impossible for you to achieve, but they're not impossible for God. And he's bringing you closer and closer to this perfect ideal. He's doing that within you. The ultimate perfection of which we're going to experience in heaven, obviously, and on the new heavens and earth, yes. But he's in the process of building these qualities within your heart right now. Have you ever experienced where it's like you're sitting, you're screwing up, and it feels bad, Well, and then you struggle in guilt. This is not because God has forsaken you, or no longer loves you, or is done with you because you're screwed up. That's not how he works. His grace is he loves you and accepts you no matter what if you've received Christ as your personal Savior. This is simply God trying to build within you. He's working in your heart out of care, out of compassion, out of love for you. And he's drawing your attention to issues, to areas in your heart that he's cleaning out, that we need our attention on. That's how he works. And he's doing this not to shame you, not to make you feel horrible because he doesn't love you. He's doing this because he loves you and he cares for you and he wants what's best for you. And he's going to work in you. He is shaping your character. And that's why it's important for like people like me, very functional, types. Like sometimes we do need to just pause and say, like God, what is it that you are shaping within me, within my life right now? I want to accomplish, I want to do this and do that for God, do ministry in his name. That's great. He does want us to do that too. That's true. But what he also wants to do with us, and even more importantly than that, he wants to shape us. He wants to shape our heart, shape our character. And this is God's ultimate goal with us, is to do a character redesign of us and to shape that. Because even what we do flows out of who we are, our character. And so God is working on that. And to finish, I'll return to the diesel illustration. The reason for that is because I read a lot about diesel engines, so I got to talk about it more. But also, right, the diesel car, or the diesel, I guess it'd be a truck probably, most likely, right? It's like you bring that to the station, and then you're going to fill it up with some diesel gas. Oops, you didn't reach for the green one, right? That's the diesel. You put the regular gas in. Yikes. That's a disaster. That's a real problem. That's not insignificant. That's significant. But if you're a Christian, it's like having the world's most skilled diesel engineer, mechanic alive with you wherever you go, within your diesel truck. He is always constantly with you. And he looks out his window, he says, "Did you just put regular gas in there?" "Yeah, I did." "I'm not surprised you would do that." Let's work on this, right? What's Jesus going to say first? He's going to say first, the mechanic in this illustration. He's going to say, don't drive anywhere. He's going to say, stop. Because the worst thing you can do when you put the wrong fuel in is turn the car on, because that sends the fuel all over the place. That's where more and more destruction goes on. The worst thing we can do at that point is drive away. And so he's going to say, stop. Let's stop, okay? But he says, we can fix this. We can fix this. This is no problem. This is not anywhere close to a problem that's too big for me. Let me help you. I'm going to call a tow truck, because that's what we have to do now. We need a tow truck, and that's okay. The tow truck's going to bring it in the shop, and there I can work. And we're going to flush that system. We're going to get all that gas out where it shouldn't be, right? And guess what? I'm going to do that because I'm the mechanic, and you don't know anything about diesel engines except what you Wikipedia'd real quick, for a while. All right, I know how to do it. You don't, so let me work. Let me cook. And but you need to stop, and you need to let me do this for a little while. And now, okay, job's done. Let's get back on the road. That's how God works with us. That's his grace, right? It's not like, oh, we put the wrong gas in and now he hates us. No. He loves us. He cares for us so much. And he does the work of transforming us out of his abundant love and kindness and grace, because that's who he is. And so we don't have to worry about constantly measuring up to him and impressing him. He's just really not that impressed by our good works. He has all the good works. But we have to let him mold our character. We have to let him do that transforming work. And he'll do that work. And he promises. That's the thing. It's a promise in Philippians 1 where he says, he who began a good work in you will continue to perfect it. It's a lifelong process where God is cleaning out the system and making us good to go.